survivors use pain and pleasure differently. They use pain and pleasure instead of letting pain and pleasure use them. Things do come to those who wait, but only things left over from those that hustle. Isn't that a neat quote from Abe? He said to me, you know, there are two types of people. He said there are people that just let life happen, and then there are people that make life happen. That what you focus on shows up. It comes about. And it's an amazing process, and we don't always know. Thank you very much. I think we're okay. I paid her. Thank you very much for coming. I'm delighted to be here. I have to start out by reading a little insert in this week's paper. It said that tickets are now available for 2 inspirational talks by nationally renowned humorist W. Mitchell and Dr. Gary Arnold. I said to my wife, can you believe they called me a humorist? And she said, can you believe they called you internationally renowned? Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Important topic, too. Not survivorship. It's beyond survivorship. What is it? What does it mean? Clearly, at some point in time, we're all going to die. It might be tomorrow, it might be 40 years from now. That's not my point. It's not what I'm going to talk about. We all have stress, we all have challenges, we all have problems. It's a part of this world, it's a part of the job, it's a part of our communication skills, part of home. It's not what I'm going to talk about. It's not my point. And we could all use stress management and time management and problem-solving skills and communication skills and team building. Good tools to have. Can help everyone. It's not my point tonight. My point. Sometime between now and whenever, we're going to come to that point just before the moment of dying. And then we're going to look back. And there are going to be some people here in this room who are going to look back, and then they're going to recognize that they never lived. That the problems and the concerns, the stress, sucked their energy out of them instead of built them up. They didn't feel personally enriched. They didn't feel enlivened by the process, and that's my point. That's my topic. I've been talking for 22 years, hundreds of companies, hundreds and hundreds of survivors, different mentality. And what I've identified was there are 4 central characteristics to a survivor. 4 central qualities that run throughout all the events of their lives. What I call the signature, and I'll get into that in just a second. But the central quality of survivors, over and over again, didn't matter whether they were health concerns or financial concerns or family concerns or environmental problems, didn't matter what the crisis was or what the problem was, these 4 characteristics, traits, qualities, identifying trademarks kept showing up over and over again. And that central quality, the cord of it all, was that survivors they were participants. They got involved in the process. They got involved in what they were doing. They weren't just bystanders who sat on the sidelines and watched life pass them by. Now, along with that central theme, there were 3 other qualities. And they wrapped these qualities around that central theme, and it strengthened it and gave them a bite in life. Those 3 qualities were that, first, they used pain and pleasure differently. Second was they handled problems differently. The third quality was they honored their potential, their inner self, differently, the capacity. I was real fortunate in that my father was a naturalist. We were from seacoastal New Hampshire, and my father, like his father before him, was a naturalist. And he would bring me out every single weekend into the New Hampshire woods, even from the time I was a little tyke. And we'd go into the White Mountains or the Maine woods, or during the long weekends he'd bring me down to the Cape, and we'd go trekking and hiking and camping. He wanted me to have a healthy appreciation for Mother Nature and how to handle myself in the woods, survival skills, camping, trekking, orienteering. And he figured the best way for me to have a healthy appreciation was by improving my knowledge and getting me out amongst the trees, the plants, the trails. Day after day, we'd go into our backyard, which was woods. He'd show me plants and let me identify certain trees, tracks. He'd teach me mountain orienteering, which even when I was a little tyke, would be learning how to get from where you were in the woods to where you wanted to go. Quite a process. But I learned to identify trees, trails, mountains by names. Wonderful experience. I really built up an appreciation for it. One day when I was 8 or 9 years old, we'd trekked out in Tenerife Mountain in New Hampshire, 45-minute walk from the nearest road. We get out there and Dad looked at me and he said, "Gary, what do you think about being left alone for 20 or 30 minutes? Let me go out and do a little trekking on my own." And I thought about it. That's great. I know where we are. I know how to get here. I know what the trees are. I'm all set. Go. This is a test of my manhood. I know what you're talking about. Go. Great. He looked at me and he said, "Gary, you sure? You okay with that?" I said, "Absolutely. Go. I'm real comfortable with it. I think it's kind of neat. Go." So he walked and disappeared amongst the trees. And I leaned up against this great big oak that I was against, and I looked around, and I knew the trees and the plants, and I listened to the woods, and it was a wonderful sound. I knew the birds that were making sounds. I knew the animals that were out. I knew the trees, the plants. I knew the trails I was at. It was a wonderful experience. I felt a growth. I really felt like it was a test of my manhood. Wonderful experience. 10 minutes later, started hearing some sounds, some animal noises I wasn't quite familiar with. And then I recognized that the canopy of the trees was over me, and it cast shadows with the wind and kind of blocked my vision, so I couldn't quite see everything. Then I noticed that the shadows, when they went over me, it kind of was cold. It was a little bit eerie. 15 minutes passed, and I recognized I couldn't see a horizon. Trees were everywhere, all around me. I was alone. And I heard this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Now, it was a sound I'd never heard before. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. It was getting a little bit louder and a little bit closer, and I knew. So I was looking. I had no idea what it was. I couldn't identify it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Closer, it was coming, and I couldn't see what it was. I knew it was coming. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And then I made contact directly in front of me. It was a great white owl, 5-foot wingspan, flying around 4 feet off the ground, coming right at me, looking right at me in the eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, taller than I was. Whoosh, whoosh. I started sweating. My throat was, my heart was up here. I just whoosh, whoosh, closer and closer. It kept coming. I could hear my heart. I knew it could hear my heartbeat. I knew it could. It was just going. It didn't veer off. I didn't dare move. I was just covered with sweat. And then it landed on the branch directly above my head. Now, I wish I could tell you that I was wet with just perspiration. But you might know otherwise. I could have touched its tail. It was that close. And it wasn't there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and I didn't dare move. And then it flew off, and I heard rustling and the side, and I knew it was Dad coming back, and sure enough, I saw him on the side of the mountain And he started walking toward me, and oh, I felt so much better. And he came up to me, and he said, "Gary, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, just fine." He said, "You ready to go back?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." We walked back 45 minutes to the car, and I never said a word back. Didn't open my mouth. Now, that wasn't like me at all. When I was in the woods, I was asking, "What's this plant for? Where does this go to? What track is this? Can we eat this? No. Can we do this? No." I was always talking. My father knew something was very different. Got back in the car. The way home, I didn't say a word. Didn't open my mouth. Dad said, "Gary, what happened out there?" And I said, "Dad, I had this great big owl that just flew right toward me. He landed within reach. It was scary. It was real scary. It's the biggest bird I ever saw in my life. Closest bird I ever saw in my life. That's kind of neat now, but that is real scary." And he looked at me and he said, "You know, I'm coming back out and I'm going to do a little trekking in a little different section in the woods next week." He said, "Do you want to come back with me?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm right there. I'm right with you. I'll go. In fact, if you want to leave me 30 minutes again, I'm ready. That's fine." And he smiled and he said, "Gary, that's wonderful." He said, "You got to recognize, you know, you're going to have all kinds of fears that are going to come up, all kinds of circumstances. They're going to be things that you're scared of, frightened of." He said, "You just can't sit on the sidelines. It's wonderful that you're going back." He said, "You've got to be a participant in life. You can't sit on the sidelines." He said to me, "You know, there are two types of people." He said, "There are people that just let life happen, and then there are people that make life happen." He said, "You've got to make it happen. You've got to be a participant and not a spectator." I thought, wow, pretty neat. I'm ready. Let's go. That owl was the biggest bird I'd ever had, and that was a start for me to recognize that participation didn't matter what the event was. I could tie my own meaning to it and just make a little change. Even as an 8 or 9-year-old, I had a little different venue, just a little different idea about what it meant. Even if it was frightening, I could go back to it. You know, Mark Twain said that courage is the mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. And George Bernard Shaw, just about the turn of the century, same as Twain, said that people blame what they are on their circumstances. Shaw said, "I don't believe in circumstances." He said, "You give me someone that knows what they want, and they go out to get it, and if the circumstance doesn't exist, they make it." That's the people I like. And even Abe Lincoln said, "You know, things do come to those who wait, but only things left over from those that hustle." Isn't that a neat quote from Abe? It is good. 32 years later, I had a video that I released, and Mickey LaBeouf, the best-selling author of Working Smart, who's here tonight, endorsed my video and said, "You know, there are two types of people. There are people that make things happen, and there are people that let life happen." He says, "Gary makes things happen." Now, after I read that endorsement, it was wonderful. And I made a phone call, and I thanked my dad. Being a participant isn't just an activity level, it's a mindset. Now, there are people here that don't know me. Maybe you've seen my books or tapes. But I'll bet you that I can brainwash you in 30 seconds or less, maybe 45 seconds or less. What do you think? Think I can do it? Brainwash you, 45 seconds or less. Let's try it. Let's play a little game. I'm going to say a word 3 times. I'm going to spell it 3 times. Then I'd like you to do the same. Then I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like you to answer it. So I'm going to say the word silk, S-I-L-K, silk, S-I-L-K, silk, S-I-L-K. Could you say that word? Silk, S-I-L-K, silk, S-I-L-K, silk, S-I-L-K. Thank you. What do cows drink? No, we drink the milk. The cows drink the water. We can do better than that. I know we can do better than that. Let's try another one. Shop. S-H-O-P. Shop. S-H-O-P. Shop. S-H-O-P. Now all of you. Shop. S-H-O-P. Shop. S-H-O-P. Shop. S-H-O-P. What do we do at a green light? Wonderful. This side goes and this side stops. We're getting there. I'll bet you on the third one we'll make out fine. Boast, B-O-A-S-T, boast, B-O-A-S-T, boast, B-O-A-S-T, you. Boast, B-O-A-S-T, boast, B-O-A-S-T, boast, B-O-A-S-T. What do we put in a toaster? Oh, wonderful. We got a few toasts. We got a few toasts. But what changed in that process was we went out of a passive mindset, which a lot of times we're in, into an active mindset. Now, granted, we had a lot of clues going into this, but that's the difference in being a participant. You see, when it happens inside, when I recognize that I listen in here first before I give validity to what's out there. You know, if I was to ask you, and repeat, fill in the last part of this. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. And when Winston tastes good like a cigarette should, they haven't been on in years and years. Those commercials haven't been on in years and years. But what happens now? We own that script, just like it did. That script is ours. I possess it. You know that by the time the average child in America is 18, they've seen 26,000 murders on TV? Isn't that unbelievable? 26,000. But you have the idea about what it means to be an active observant. Let me ask you this. Is the capital of Kentucky Louisville or Lexington? You know? Wonderful. Wonderful. That's the idea. You see, the question that we ask has to come inside. It's got to be not always given by someone on the outside. People we don't know, people we don't believe, people we don't question, but there's so much that we assume. Let me give you an analogy. A person that was driving their motorcycle between the U.S. and Mexican border. And the security guards, the customs people would go out and check the motorcycle, look in the saddlebags, and they'd always find rocks in this guy's motorcycle bags. Rocks. And they'd empty them and they'd put the rocks back, and there was nothing but rocks there. Really surprised. And let the guy go off on his way, and 2 weeks later he's back with another motorcycle and rocks in the saddlebag. They'd empty the saddlebags out and check the rocks and put the rocks back in, and 2 weeks later he'd be back with another motorcycle, rocks in the saddlebags. Over and over and over again. Driving him crazy. They finally said to him, "We know you're up to something. We know it. We just can't figure it out." He said, "If you tell us what you're doing, we'll just let you go. We know you're up to something." He said, "Well, it's easy. I'm smuggling stolen motorcycles." But we have the idea about how important it is to have the questions generated from inside first, to be an active participant mentally. It comes from listening. Second trait, survivors use pain and pleasure differently. They use pain and pleasure instead of letting pain and pleasure use them. I was a Little League player. Played first base. I did a pretty good job at it. My dad was the assistant coach. One particular game, I was out at first base, ready for the game, and ready at first, and in my position, and team was ready, and hard hit ground ball right at me. Go down to do the fielding, and it takes a bad hop right in front of me, comes up and hits me in the nose. I drop to my knees. My team members finish the play. After the play is over, I walk on the sideline and sit down with a bloody nose. And my father doesn't say a word. Waits till I've composed myself, works with the rest of the team. Then he looks at me and he says, "Gary, next time finish the play." And he finish the play? I got a bloody nose and just got hit in the nose. I didn't understand. I got to digress just for a little bit. It was the week of my first date, ever. 8th grade social. I had my first dance, too, Cindy Bertel. I ended up going to this because all I could hear was my father in the background. Next time, finish the play. Next time, finish the play. I went with 2 black eyes and a nose like a toucan. We danced like this because I was scared of having my nose hit. And she was very nice, very considerate. But that came back to me. Next time, finish the play. And I thought about it. And I was just starting to understand what it meant to use pain and pleasure instead of letting pain and pleasure use me. Now, one of the events in my life happened from skiing, and I was an excellent skier. I competed on a national basis. I was captain of my ski team in high school. I had a wonderful time skiing. I skied about 50 days a year. I started skiing at the age of 3. I had leather boots, bamboo poles, and wooden skis. By the time I was 5, I was a better skier than my father was. By the time I was 7, I was competing throughout New England. And by the time I hit high school, I was competing in slalom, giant slalom, and ski jumping, and I loved it. It was wonderful. People knew me in a variety of states for skiing, and I had a great time, and I loved ski jumping. I had one event where it was a meet, regular meet, 40 or 50 people, spectators down below, what they call a K90. It's where you sail about 103 meters, that's 333 feet. And I put my skis on my shoulder, and you climb this ladder well over 50 feet. And then you get up on a little platform a lot smaller than this and put your skis on. This particular day was really cold, really cold. So my team members came up and started helping me out. I was the 4th jumper. That's the jumper that they think will go the distance. And I was focusing on my jump and just concentrating and doing a little bit of visualization. And they patted me on the butt and they said, "Okay, Gary, whenever you're ready, we put your bindings on, go to it." And I stood and I visualized like we were trained to do. And we visualize differently than what you may do. We were taught to feel the wind in our face, to see the crowd, to feel the skis coming up under us and actually be lifted by the wind. We were taught to feel the tension in our body and the press of our legs. We were taught to make it a sensory experience. And when it was just right and we could visualize the result that we wanted, then we were free to go, and not until. I'd done it hundreds of times, hundreds and hundreds of times. And when that feeling came over and I knew it was absolutely right, I moved my skis over the lip of the platform and I went down the chute, and you quickly pick up speed. You go down into a tuck, and at the very lip of the jump, you thrust your nose out over the tip of your skis, put your hands around your back, and your skis plane up under you. It is the greatest sense of freedom that you would ever experience. It is wonderful. Did you ever see The Wide World of Sports? That's the jump. I was up, skis planing up, looking at the crowd, and then I saw them open their mouths. And I watched 8 feet, 3 inches of skis pass me by. And in a New Hampshire term, I knew I'd bought the farm. They woke me up an hour and a half later on the way to the hospital. I'd pushed my nose into my face, my ears were bleeding, my neck was swollen. I couldn't see. I could hear my assistant coach talking to the coach saying, "It looks pretty bad for Gary." He said there could have even been brain damage. My coach thought it over for a second, and he said, well, how will we ever know? When we got to the hospital, they wheeled me in, whispering in my ear that we're going in for an operation and it doesn't look good. The only thing I said to him is, I'm just glad tomorrow I'm not dating Cindy Bertel. Then I heard footsteps, and I knew these footsteps. I mean, I could tell that they were similar to what I knew. And then I heard this woman yelling, that's not my son, that's not my son. And I'm thinking, it's her son. And I knew it was bad. 3.5 hours they gave up trying to put the cartilage back into my nose, took the bone out of the inside of my skull and stapled it together, which works fine until you try to go through the metal detectors at an airport. And I was okay with that. But the summertime really messed me up bad. See, I wasn't a ski jumper anymore. I couldn't ski jump. And my identity was to be a jumper and a skier, and I was great at it, and everybody knew me as a ski jumper. And I'd messed up what I was with what I did, and I had it all screwed up, and I didn't feel very good about myself. And my activity level went from doing 22 miles a day to doing nothing. My dad just watched. I had a few friends come over, and he said, why don't you just go out for a walk and not do the running? Why don't you just try it? 30 days passed, and I tried to jog just a little bit. My nose would bleed. It wasn't good. But I kept at it, and I kept a little bit longer and a little bit stronger. By October, I was back to doing 22 miles a day and working out in a trampoline, 18-foot trampoline, just to improve endurance. And my dad said, you going to jump? I said, I think I am. Wouldn't you know, we had an early snow, October, and he said, you want me to take you up, practice jump? I said, you give me a week, let me see what the conditions are, let me keep working out, and I'll let you know. That week went like that. And he said, Gary, do you want to go? I said, yeah, let's go. So we packed the skis in the car, and off we went. And he stayed at the base of the jump, just a 30-meter jump. And let me walk up. There were people, 40, 50 people down watching, always spectators at the end of the jumps. Other jumpers were there, they just let me walk. It's 400-foot vertical from top to bottom, 30 meters. And I walked it up with skis on my back, and I looked at the 50-foot ladder, and I started up the ladder, skis on my shoulder. 7 feet up on the ladder, my legs started shaking. I was scared. I was shaking so bad, the ladder was shaking. I got up top of that jump, and I was soaking wet. I looked down, and I'd have climbed down, but the ladder was so damn frightened walking up, I didn't want to go back. I thought, I don't have to jump. I don't ever have to jump. It's not a part of life. But I really want it. I tried to visualize. I tried to get the idea. I tried to see what I needed to see. And it took eternity. He didn't say a word. My dad just stayed down there. Team members stayed away. Didn't say a word. Just let me go. I don't know how long I took to this day. I don't know how long I was up there. But I made the decision, put my skis on. And I didn't tell you why they came off the first time, did I? See, my team members were up there. There's just a cable that goes around your foot. And there's a little indentation in the back of your heel. And that cable fits in that indentation. And when you lift off, the skis plane up and your heel actually comes off the ski. Well, they didn't have my cabling in that little notch. And when I lifted up, the cable slapped down and my skis were free to go. I was up there and I checked my skis 10 times. I made the decision to go. Just a 4-inch difference. And I went down the chute when it was ready, and I tucked down, and the end of the jump, I put my nose out over the tip of my skis, and my skis came up underneath me, and the jump was done too soon, and I was landed. And the people just did a little thing like this, and I knew it was a terrible jump, and they thought it was a beginner. They thought it was a guy who'd never jumped. Took my skis off my feet, and I said, "Dad, let's go. I want to go back home." We went back home. He said, "Gary, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?" I said, "Dad, I failed. It was a lousy jump. I've jumped 5 times that distance." He said, "Gary, I've seen you jump 100 times. I've seen you jump 200 times. I've never been as proud of you on any jump that you've ever had as I was on that jump." And I said, "Dad, that was a lousy jump." He said, "You've thought about that jump all summer long. You had to get your head on right again. You don't have to jump. It's not a part of you. But you used pain and pleasure. You wanted it. You knew what it was inside." He said, "You're going to have better jumps. You're going to have better distances." But it took courage and a lot of determination. And I thought I made my dad happy. And I started to get a different idea about what that jump meant. And I started to feel pretty good about it. And I went back next week, got a little bit better. 3, 4, 5 weeks of practice, and I was back and competing again. And I outjumped my previous year by yards. But you see, I had a different idea about what it meant. I recognized that I could grow through the pain. I recognized that pain and pleasure are there to grow through, not to suffer from, and not to be a hedonist through either. And we can focus on what destroys our dreams, or else we can just tear down the barriers that block our dreams. You know, we're going to leave here. We're a big, happy family in this room. It's pretty safe. But as soon as we leave and step back outside, the naysayers are going to happen. And we're going to open up the newspaper, and we're going to open up magazines, and we're going to have friends that are going to tell us that the economy is falling apart, that unemployment is rising, that economic downsizing continues to occur, that there are problems in healthcare, that there are problems in health. Maybe they're going to label a problem that you have. And the important thing to recognize is, which way is your head going when they're talking like this? Is it going like this, or is it going like this? Now, how do you carry that idea about using pain and pleasure? Taking it with you, making it a part of you that you have control of. Let me share with you that I think the best source of motivation that you can have to remember that is right outside your doorstep. When you walk out onto your sidewalk or the road or the concrete or the tar, and you happen to see a single blade of grass that's pushed through the road. And then you remember that whatever is stagnant will always be overcome by what keeps growing. And you can always use pain and pleasure for your benefit. You have control. You've got the label. Third trait kind of goes along with that, actually. They grow through their problems. That means that they have a solution orientation instead of a problem orientation. They recognize that they don't need a value judgment about growth. That really what growth is it's seeking more information, and you've always got a choice about seeking more information. You can always choose again. There's always more information out there. Always more information. Do you realize that in the 1800s, the U.S. Patent Office temporarily closed down because they had the idea that everything that could be patented was patented? Isn't that amazing? But now and then, do you get that idea and that mindset? That everything that can be done has been done? I do now and then. I just have to remember that I can grow by just seeking information and choosing to follow that. You know, I am here a testimony to growing through problems. When I started off in school, I had a terrible lisp. I had a real debilitating lisp. It kept me back in the 2nd grade. I was in speech therapy every single day. We did sentence structures and English exercises and word exercises to re-educate my tongue. Everything I said had a lisp. Kids picked on me because I had a problem, I had a challenge. Bullies picked on me because I was a little bit different. I was quiet in class. It affected my schoolwork. But I had an enlightened speech therapist. And she told me, she said, Gary, you know, you can use this problem to be an advantage. And your intent can actually have something that's a jewel in this problem. If you'll focus on what you want to get out of it, it's an advantage to you. I thought that was a bunch of poppycock. How can my lisp be a help? She said, work with me. Go through the education, go through the exercises, work with me, let's get a plan. Know what you want out of this. Decide. Make the decision. Take control. But I still lisp. I said, what am I going to do? I can't get rid of it. She said, what you are now isn't necessarily what you will be if you'll work with it. Work with me. So I made a plan. 2nd grade, I made a plan, and my plan was, number one, I was going to stop running. No more running from the kids, no more running from the bullies. I was going to work every single day on the exercises. I was going to be real diligent about it. And the very first day I made that decision, and I left her room, I got beaten up. I got home pretty disheveled, and my mother says, what happened to you? I told her. I said, I'm not running anymore. None. No more running. She said, who did it? I'm going to go get him. 97 pounds and not an ounce of fear. And I said, Mom, just leave it alone. Let it go. I'll take care of it. You know what my proactive plan was? I was going to learn every single joke I could, preferably lisp jokes, so that the kids would start laughing at my lisp jokes and not laughing at me. And I figured if I could have them start laughing at what I was saying, instead of laughing at me, I was making progress. And I started learning jokes and doing exercises, learning jokes and doing exercises, learning jokes and doing exercises. And then one day I recognized I had 3 or 4 people, classmates, that were listening to my little stories. And they were laughing. And they weren't laughing at me, they were laughing with me. And it made a mindset, a paradigm shift. I knew at that moment I was going to make it. It took me 2 years to overcome that lisp. 2 years. And by the end of it, I had a reasonable amount of friends. And an amazing thing happened. I had a skill. I had a talent. And then I look at today. I talk 135 days a year. I was out in the Gulf 3 days last week, talking to you, having the honor of talking to you today. November, I'm in New York. December, I'm doing 10 days in Peru. January, I'm talking with Wayne Dyer and Bernie Siegel. February, I'm in Hawaii. I think, wow. That's the energy. That's where the energy went. That's where the solution happened. It followed the energy. The intent had a form to it. I didn't know what it was going to be. I had no idea, but I'll tell you it did. I wish I could always tell what that form was going to be, the way it was going to show up, but I don't always know. But I can share this with you from the bottom of my heart. That what you focus on shows up. It comes about. And it's an amazing process, and we don't always know. You know, we don't always know where it comes from, and we're taught not to know. We're taught to believe what we see. We're taught to believe that what reality is I can touch, see, smell, and taste. Let me give you an example. If I had an apple in my hand and I dissected that apple and counted the seeds and I knew the exact number of seeds, chances are every single person would tell me that's a good reality check. But survivors would say no. See, they know that there's more to it than that observable data. Because no matter how many seeds I can count in that apple, there's no way to know how many apples are in each seed. And that's the other half of that equation. That's where the intention happens. And history is the best source of looking over and over again at seeing that form and seeing that intent materialize. I love looking at history. I think about Henry Ford. You know, you've got management books all over the place, and they've got quotes over and over again from the great management skills of Henry Ford. But what you don't see in the management books is that in his first 3 years in the auto business, he failed, went bankrupt twice. It's amazing. 1954, Napoleon Hill wrote the nucleus of self-help books, Think and Grow Rich. Wonderful book. It started the evolution of self-help books. And yet, while Napoleon Hill was writing that book, he failed in business 6 times. Chester Carlson took 7 years bringing his idea to 20 corporations. And in 7 years, he got 20 rejections. But he believed in his idea. He knew it worked. He had proof that it worked. He was committed to his idea. And on the 21st corporation that looked at his idea, they purchased the rights. It was Haloid Corporation in Rochester, New York. Great determination. It took him 7 years to do it. Oh, did I tell you it was Xerox is what we call it now. And then I think about some of the entertainers. 1954, Elvis Presley was thrown out of the Grand Ole Opry. Isn't that amazing? They missed it. Decca Records in 1956 fired Buddy Holly. 1962, they let the Beatles go because guys with guitars just aren't in. Slight miscalculation. 1959, Universal Pictures, Burt Reynolds and Clint Eastwood. They didn't have any talent. Out they were. Didn't stop them. That's growing through your problems. My favorite example, James Benson Irwin, 10 years ago, over a decade ago. He was flat in his back in the hospital, 2 broken legs, broken jaw, concussion that took his memory, 2 years of psychiatry, truth serum, hypnosis. 2 years later, he was back in the cockpit. See, he lost it. He had a plane crash that took it from him. 2 years later, he was back in the cockpit. He wanted more. He applied to the U.S. Corps of Astronauts, and he was rejected. So he applied again, and he was rejected. And he applied again, and he was rejected. And he applied again, and he was rejected. James Benson Irwin, 8th man to walk on the moon. That's growing through your problems, focusing on the solution. Hal Berkowitz. How many people have heard of Hal Berkowitz? Of course you haven't. He quit. Losers focus on the penalties of failure. Winners focus on the rewards of success. It's a mindset shift. It's slight, but it's a solution orientation that carries you through. And what you focus your intent on has an energy attraction to it. And that intent grows. 4th characteristic. Survivors honor their potential, their capacity. It's a wonderful word. Capacity is so nebulous, it's airy-fairy, you don't see it. But if you look real closely, it shows up. So you honor your capacity, and what I noticed was that people that go beyond just survivorship don't use the word but very much, B-U-T. And what happens every time at the end of a sentence it's got but in it? is it means that whatever's going to follow is a And what it does is it makes what was before real. It makes it valid. It puts it into a container that says it can't be done, and it gives it a negative focus. And when it's a negative energy, it attracts a negative force. We don't use but very much. And the other thing is, because of that, they look at history as only 10% what happened to them, and 90% what they feel about it. What it really is saying is that they look at history as being relative, not concrete. You see, their intent makes history. Politicians do it all the time. They rewrite their last administration's record. We do it all the time in history books, too. We can do it in our personal life to grow from it, to benefit from it. See, we're always gathering new information, and information gives us new data to realign where we want to go and how we want to get there. Capacity is continually growing. Let me give you an example of when capacity wasn't followed, when potential wasn't followed. Do you remember the 1950s movie The Hustler with Burt Reynolds, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman? Thank you. It's a wonderful movie. He's a pool shop. He's a pool hustler. His job is to kind of be under disguise. He wants to be a little bit klutzy the way he shoots pool so that he cons people. They think that he's a little bit of a buffoon and can't play pool very well, and they want to take his money. And he fools them into believing he's not very good, but he keeps making the shots kind of undercover. Well, that's the pool shop's purpose. Not a good one, but it's a purpose nonetheless. Well, in this movie, three thugs are teasing him, calling him names, getting under his skin. And finally they get in under his skin so much, he forgets his purpose. And he starts to make shots professionally. And they recognize real quickly, boy, we've been conned. So they break his thumbs. And that's the negative idea about missing your purpose, losing capacity. Let me give you a positive example. 16 years old, my Uncle Roger just comes back from spending a year in California, and he brings me back as a gift. He'd been with the gauchos out there for a year. He brings me back as a gift a 16-foot bullwhip. Now, for a 16-year-old boy and a 16-foot bullwhip, what a toy. My mother didn't like it, but I did. And I got real good at using this bullwhip with my next-door neighbor, Paul Martell. We had milk bottles, they had bottles back then, and we'd stuff a newspaper in the bottle, and we'd sit back and we'd snap that bullwhip until we knocked the paper down 2 inches at a time. And we kept going at it until we could make that newspaper down to like a ½ an inch from the milk bottle. And we got so good at it, we stopped using the milk bottle and started holding the paper in our hands, snapping it really closely. And we started working so close we started using cigarettes. We didn't smoke, but that was real convenient. Then we started doing it overhand, snapping it overhand so we could crack it and take the cigarette out of each other's hands. Then we started in the mouth, snapping it out. I thought I was getting great at it. I wanted to show my dad what I was doing with the bullwhip. So one day, summertime, I called my dad out and I said, "Dad, come on out and see what I'm doing." And I was going to snap that bullwhip right at his ear and crack it like thunder. Scare him. For some reason, my dad this day decided to run out of the house to see what I was doing. He turned around the corner of that garage. I had the bullwhip up ready to be cracked, and then I saw he was running toward me, and it was too late. He turned around, I came down across his back, I ripped his shirt open and welted and cut his back. I dropped the bullwhip and I said, "Dad, I'm sorry, it's not what I wanted to do, I'm sorry." And I went up and I hugged him and I said, "I'm sorry, Dad," and I was crying. I'll tell you right then, I didn't think I'd ever make this talk. I said, "Dad, I'm sorry, it's not what I wanted. It's just not what I wanted to do." And he hugged me and said, "Let's go change my shirt and look at my back." And he said, "I'm not going to tell your mom." So we went in, changed his shirt, and I'd cut his back open. There are 100 times in the next 2 years he could have used that against me. Probably 200, but we'll say 100 for now. He never did. And when we were at the supper table one time after that, we decided to let my mother finally know what I'd done. I thought I wasn't going to get into too much trouble a couple years later. And he never used it against me. Never. That's staying on purpose. You know, my dad's in his late 70s now, and I said to him about 2 years ago, now, and I've used that story hundreds and hundreds of times, and I had the meaning, and I understood the meaning. And I said, Dad, we're talking about family things that had happened in childhood, and I said, remember the time when I cracked your back with that bullwhip? And he said, no. I said, Dad, you can't forget something that important. That's important to me. You remember the time I cracked your back with, ripped your back open? He said, no. I thought, Alzheimer's for my father. I can see it coming. I said, how can you forget something like that? And then he said, all I remember is the hug afterwards. And I got a whole new meaning to what happened. And that's staying on purpose. Now, he could have handled it 100 different ways. 100 different ways. But you see, he had vision. He looked at the past in light of what he wanted to accomplish. That's what vision is. That's what potential and capacity is. It's viewing your past experiences in light of where you want to go. Basically, vision means that you can let mastery, self-mastery, take as long as you want to. Means that in the river of life you recognize you're going to hit a few low spots and you're going to hit a few rocks. And it means that there are no failures. None. Not any. Ever. You can always choose again. Always choose again. You know, in reviewing 4 characteristics of someone that goes beyond survivorship. They're participants. They aren't spectators. They aren't passive observers. They get involved. They make decisions from the inside out. They use pain and pleasure differently. They don't let pain and pleasure use them. They grow through their problems. It's a solution orientation. It's just a little shift in perspective. And they honor their capacity. You have to listen to it. But it's like a compass needle. You know, there's a direction, there's a pulling. And if you listen to which way it's going, you can follow it. It's there, always. And if you aren't quite on course, you can choose again. 4 little traits. You know, they're together, they're like a 39-cent block of steel. It's 1 pound of steel today, 39 cents. The wholesale value. And if I took that 1 pound of steel and I molded it into the horseshoes, a pound of horseshoes would be a pair of horseshoes, $2.30. The value increases as I mold it to a shape that's useful for me. Increase its value greatly. But if I take that 39-cent block of steel and I mold it into needles, little eyelets, needles, it increases the value to $4,280. If I refine it a little bit more and work on it a little bit more and make that 1 pound of steel, 39 cents, into the lead flywheels of a jeweled watch, it's worth $250,000. 4 little traits by themselves without involvement and manipulation. They don't empower you unless you plug them into your life. But if you plug them in, they give a power and a value. In fact, they're invaluable. And you have the chance to employ them in any way you want because you've got the choice. And your investment starts now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Also available on audio for $12.95. Additional videos are $39.95. To order by phone, have your Visa, MasterCard, or American Express ready and call 1-800-472-1320. If you would like a free catalog of other books, audio cassettes, or videotapes by Dr. Gary Arnold, please call or write to the address on your screen.
Survivors use pain and pleasure differently. They use pain and pleasure instead of letting pain and pleasure use them. Things do come to those who wait, but only things left over from those that hustle. Isn't that a neat quote from Abe? He said to me, you know, there are two types of people. He said there are people that just let life happen, and then there are people that make life happen. That what you focus on shows up. It comes about. And it's an amazing process, and we don't always know. Thank you very much. I think we're okay. I paid her. Thank you very much for coming. I'm delighted to be here. I have to start out by reading a little insert in this week's paper. It said that tickets are now available for 2 inspirational talks by nationally renowned humorist W. Mitchell and Dr. Gary Arnold. I said to my wife, can you believe they called me a humorist? And she said, can you believe they called you internationally renowned? Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Important topic, too. Not survivorship. It's beyond survivorship. What is it? What does it mean? Clearly, at some point in time, we're all going to die. It might be tomorrow. It might be 40 years from now. That's not my point. It's not what I'm going to talk about. We all have stress. We all have challenges. We all have problems. It's a part of this world. It's a part of the job. It's a part of our communication skills, part of home. It's not what I'm going to talk about. It's not my point. And we could all use stress management and time management and problem-solving skills and communication skills and team building. Good tools to have. Can help everyone. It's not my point tonight. My point. Sometime between now and whenever, we're going to come to that point just before the moment of dying. And then we're going to look back. And there are going to be some people here in this room who are going to look back, and then they're going to recognize that they never lived. That the problems and the concerns, the stress, sucked their energy out of them instead of built them up. They didn't feel personally enriched. They didn't feel enlivened by the process. And that's my point. That's my topic. I've been talking for 22 years, hundreds of companies, hundreds and hundreds of survivors, different mentality. And what I've identified was there are 4 central characteristics to a survivor. 4 central qualities that run throughout all the events of their life. What I call the signature, and I'll get into that in just a second. But the central quality of survivors, over and over again, didn't matter whether they were health concerns or financial concerns or family concerns or environmental problems, didn't matter what the crisis was or what the problem was, these 4 characteristics, traits, qualities, identifying trademarks kept showing up over and over again. And that central quality, the cord of it all, was that survivors they were participants. They got involved in the process. They got involved in what they were doing. They weren't just bystanders who sat on the sidelines and watched life pass them by. Now, along with that central theme, there were three other qualities. And they wrapped these qualities around that central theme, and it strengthened it and gave them a bite in life. Those three qualities were first, they used pain and pleasure differently. Second was they handled problems differently. The third quality was they honored their potential, their inner self differently, their capacity. I was real fortunate in that my father was a naturalist. We were from seacoastal New Hampshire, and my father, like his father before him, was a naturalist. And he would bring me out every single weekend into the New Hampshire woods, even from the time I was a little tyke. And we'd go into the White Mountains or